Here we are, US Comedians, 9/11, 2020, interviewing Drew Landry, talking about comedy. Hello, Drew. How are you? How are you doing, man? Good to see
I'm
you.
good, man. How are you doing? It's been a while.
It has been a while since we saw each other in person
Yeah.
and
Since we've seen
did
anyone.
or done comedy in any normal sort of sense.
Yeah.
I guess
Weird.
that's a good place to start with the interview. Like, what comedy stuff were you doing pre-COVID? What kind of shows, stuff, whatever you were doing, and what have you been doing, stirring and since COVID hit, comedy-wise? I think that's a good place to get into.
Well, before COVID, I was just kind of trying to perform as much as I can. I had a monthly show at the LA Connection Comedy Theater called Mom Spaghetti that I'm hoping will be able to return once things kind of go back to normal eventually. And me and my roommate were doing a house show called Chain of Fools once a month. But yeah, between running two shows and just kind of getting up wherever I can, really. And lately I've done a few Zoom shows. I don't know. What do you think of them? I have mixed thoughts on them. Like, sometimes they're fun, sometimes,
It's definitely mixed. I think I've done one or two. One that got Zoom bombed, which was actually pretty hilarious.
I was in one that got Zoom bombed. It was so
it's rough, but it definitely can be fun. It's interesting.
Yeah, no, the Zoom bomb one, I was the one performing, and then all of a sudden there were like a million N-words popping up.
Oh, no.
Like pictures of mutilated genitals, and it was just like,
Yikes.
It was weird.
Yeah, luckily I wasn't actually up when it got Zoom bombed, but yeah, that's brutal. So yeah, it's a mixed bag since COVID. So are you, what about, like, you haven't done any in-person stuff since COVID hit? Because I know there's some distance stuff going on. What do you feel about that?
Yeah, there's some distance stuff. I feel like it's probably not safe, but I've been like tempted to give it a shot, like go to an outdoor mic, but I don't think I should, so I probably won't. Have you gone?
That sounds about right. Yeah, I'm tempted and very nervous. A friend of mine was booked on a show that was like supposed to be socially distanced. We went there. The show was inside, even though there was an outdoor space. It was like, it turned out to be like one of those like bait and switch that was actually an open mic. It was just a rough situation, but I think as more people figure this out, again, like, it'll become, I mean, comedy has always been kind of a mixed bag, but as more people figure out COVID times, I think it'll get better.
Yeah, I had a friend that went to one the other night, and she was like, I thought it'd be fine, but everyone was huddled together. No one had a mask. People were touching each other.
Oh, no, yeah.
And I was like,
Yeah, definitely a question of, well, that's a whole bigger question than I think we can even get into.
Yeah, that's a whole different thing.
That's like a whole scary thing to talk about. But more on your like personal work and history. You also do a fair bit of writing, right? Like on Medium and stuff.
Yeah, I write for Medium. I've written for a few websites. I wrote for this frat boy website. It was under a fake name because I hated the website, and then a sorority site under a woman's name. And then for a few years, I was writing satire for a hip hop site called DJ Booth. And it was kind of like, it was very specific. It was like rap based satire. But lately it's been mostly focusing on Medium because it can kind of just be any topic.
Yeah, it's pretty open. And what would you say, like, what's the crossover? Because we have a lot of people here who are both stand-ups and write for Sack of Troy, which is, a satire newspaper here at USC. Like, what are the crossovers you'd say between writing stand-up, writing for, online publication, all that kind of stuff? How does one inform the other? And
that's a good question. I feel like in some ways it's the same muscle, but there's not always a translation in that. I have plenty of, let's say, articles that obviously they couldn't be converted into stand-up or vice versa, or jokes that are funny on paper, but for whatever reason, they don't work as stand-up bits. Or sometimes there's the opposite, where there's a lot of stand-up bits that are hilarious, but if you read them on paper, there wouldn't even be a discernible punchline. So there's some overlap, and I'd argue it's the same muscle, but they're both still very different in my opinion.
I have to ask just a real specific question. Your
Yeah.
article, your Childish Gambino Donald Glover article, which hilarious. Did you ever use that as a stand-up premise, or I'm just curious,
No, I
what's the
didn't.
crossover of how many of your articles you've used as premises?
No, it was like a dumb tweet I made, and then I was having writer's block with articles. So I was like, and then I was like, that Donald Glover tweet. And I wrote the article, and then I had no idea it would get the reaction it had, because most of my articles on Medium had gotten 50 views tops. And then I check, like a few days later, and it's like 500,000, and I'm like, how the fuck did this happen?
Yeah, it's crazy.
And it's still, that's the one that's still circulating. That's the one that actually got me the job for DJ Booth. But what's annoying now is it kind of became a meme. And a lot of people would take the article and crop out by Drew Landry and just share it like it's a meme they made. So now when I say I'm the one that wrote the article, I look like I'm lying. Like I look like I stole a meme, and I'm like, this is mine.
And you did actually, I think, get quite a few people on satire, on the, whole Poe's Law thing of people taking it seriously. So that's
which is
mark of a good satire.
There's a shocking amount of those people like, Donald Glover and Gambino are the same person, you idiot. And I just like ignoring those people because I think it's funny to present the illusion that I actually don't know this. Like if there are people that don't get that it's a joke, to me that makes it more fun.
Oh, totally. So I wanted also you obviously write a fair bit about hip hop music. Your podcast is hip hop related. And I mean, I'm assuming that's like obviously a personal interest of yours.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, like how do you think you were able to bridge those kind of personal interests, take those things that we're interested in outside of comedy and bring it into producing comedy?
Well, one thing I think I've learned is to just write, when it comes to comedy, just write about the stuff you like. I feel like a lot of people get on stage and they talk about what they think the audience would like to hear. They talk about dating or politics. And if that's what you want to talk about, that's great. But I think it works best when you just write about and talk about what you're interested in, because it's less likely to be generic. And I love rap music. I always have. And I kind of stumbled into writing hip hop satire because of the Gambino article. This website, DJ Booth, reached out to me like, you want to write a humor section for us. And then that's how it started. But it's just something I realized I love doing. But I guess it wasn't anything I planned. It's something I kind of fell into and realized how much I love doing it.
Totally. Yeah, that's cool. And I'm sure that it will happen naturally with your interest, obviously. Do you want to, I kind of offhand mentioned it, but do you want to talk a little bit about your new podcast and how that's going and what?
Yeah. I'd like, so I just started it. There's only 2 episodes so far. I haven't even promoted the second episode yet, but it's called Bar Hoppin', and I have guests on. The concept is mostly comedians and rappers, a mixture of the two. And I asked the guests about their all-time favorite rap verse, and we kind of break it down. We talk about why they like it. I just wanted to do a podcast that I felt like hadn't been done before. And I was like, I feel like that's something no one's tried before.
Yeah, that's seems like a fun idea. And it was, of course, with anything with Chris Stanley in it is going to be.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, what was fun about the episode with Chris Stanley is it was about the Kanye song Homecoming. And I feel like a lot of content where you're analyzing music, it's from a perspective of like, look at what experts we are. But the whole podcast was about how both of us were too stupid to understand the metaphor in the song.
That's awesome. All right, I guess my final prepared question before we kind of open it up to the group here would be just obviously we're here because many of us are aspiring comedians who maybe just did their first open mic or have done a few open mics and are getting better, are now at the point where they want to move from open mics to book shows or wherever we are in that sort of process of wading into stand up. I'm curious for your general advice, your anecdotes from when you were at that point, and just in general what you think we should know or what we need to know.
I can think of a few. The first one, and this is just something specific and little that took me too long to realize, is because I had stage fright at the beginning, I would not look at the crowd. I'd kind of look over their heads, and I thought they didn't notice, and they totally noticed. And no matter how good the jokes are, when you sound too rehearsed or if you look nervous, like nerves are contagious. If you look nervous, the crowd's going to get uncomfortable. If you're confident, the crowd's going to feel comfortable. So just appear comfortable. If you're not confident, pretend to be confident and look the crowd in the eyes. The other thing is, and I'm sure you've encountered this, there are a lot of comics who obviously pre-COVID, their thing was they grind really hard, and they're like, bro, you got to hit 5 open mics every night of the week. You got to always be getting up and this and that. And I think it's very, very important to get tons of practice, obviously, but I don't believe in the people like, you got to get up every single night. You got to get up 5 times a night, because first off, every comic I know that does that sucks. And I think it's just true. And part of it, there are a few reasons, but part of it is if your whole life is just doing an open mic every night, you're not going to have any material because you're not going to have a life to talk about. And that's when you get stuck in this kind of like pretentious meta spiral where all your jokes are inside jokes about open mics and like, how about the bar at Flappers and shit like that and stuff that wouldn't work for the real crowd. So one thing I'd say is ignore that mentality of like, you got to always grind and get up 7 times every night. It's just, I found that I don't think that works.
I do. Yeah, that's a good, because of course that's the stereotypical advice that everyone gives, but I do think there is like a balance there, like you said, with actually living the real life and just, you know, especially for people who might feel really nervous about doing even one open mic or get stressed out about thinking or like for me, I get stressed out when I'm going to a mic and I don't have like a lot of new material.
Yeah.
Like I'm like nervous, like I don't want to do the same jokes for people who might have heard them. And I think it's most important is that you're getting something out of the mics and not just checking a box. And that's
why exactly. People go to mics just to say they went to them. And what I hate is the people at a mic that are like, they're leaning against the mic stand. They're like, oh, what else is going on? What do you guys want to talk about? It's like, why the fuck are you here if you don't have material? Right. I mean, you can attest to this, the amount of mics you go to where people literally don't have punchlines. They just don't have jokes. And I understand there is a strategy that works with some comics of going up with a vague idea and working it out, but you still got to kind of already have a joke.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of people that are like, I'm so brilliant, I'm just going to go up and talk and comedy gold is going to come out. And it's almost never the case. So,
right. And there are people like that who are grinders who will do like 2 mics in a row in the same room.
Yeah.
And it's like, come on, man. Like, I just watched you test this bad joke. Yeah, I totally, that brings me back to the negative side of back when we had in-person open mics.
Oh, yeah, which there are plenty of.
Oh, there's lots of drawbacks. All right, yeah, so I guess I'll just open it up to anyone who has questions for Drew or to just go ahead and unmute yourself if you have a question. And if I think of anything, I can pop back in as well, but feel free to unmute and introduce yourself.
Drew, my name's Daniel. I was kind of curious about like your living as a comedian. Like you can get as personal as you want with this question. I was curious, like, what would you say like your breakdown is of like where like your finances come from, living as a comedian and as a writer, and kind of like where you make the most money living as an entertainer?
Yeah. So when I moved to LA from Baltimore like 5 years ago, when I lived in Baltimore, all my money came from comedy. When I moved to LA, it's much harder to get paid doing comedy here. So that completely stopped. So I was making all my money from writing for that website, DJ Booth. So the money came from the writing part. The stand-up, I'd get paid every now and then. Hopefully, eventually I'll get paid a lot again. We'll see. But yeah, it was mostly from the writing.
Yeah, that's a great question. And just out of curiosity, what you were doing, like stand-up shows in Baltimore, or basically like that kind of stuff?
Shows, either headlining bars, or I was, most of my money came from touring as an opening act for certain comedians. So I'd go on the road, and that's how I made my money.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a great, actually, I mean, unless anything else, I'd love to just dig into more. I mean, if touring and the road and stuff like that ever comes back, that's something I think that people here I'm certainly interested in. So if you want to chat a little bit about that, that would be awesome.
Yeah, well, I got lucky in that when I was young, there were certain comics that discovered me and asked me to go on the road with them as an opener. So I got lucky in that being an opener on the road is something I kind of stumbled into. Occasionally, I'd go on the road as a headliner, but that was mostly from I'd be at a venue as the opener. I did well, and then I'd hit them up 6 months later, like, hey, can I headline here? And they'd say, yeah, and then I'd do my own show there. But a lot of it, when I'd headline shows, it came from being an opener first, performing in front of the bookers, showing them my act. And if they liked me, then hitting them up later, like, hey, can I do an hour next time? So it's all gradual. Like no one just goes to a club or a venue the first time and they're the headliner.
Yeah, of course.
Building it up. You know what I mean? You're letting them see you, and then you're being like, hey, I got more material. Can I come back?
Right on. I'll read out Max Kerwin has a question in the chat here. How long do you usually work on a joke before it's finished? And I mean, I think also you digging into your writing process in general it's always interesting to hear how different types of comics write. So that's always
yeah, it's weird because there's no right or wrong way to do it. Usually what I do is I'll get a joke idea and I'll text it to myself, like just a word or a sentence to remind me of what the idea was. And typically, when comedy existed, I'd write a rough version of the joke. I'd try it out, see how it works. And if it was really bad, typically I'd just scrap it. My rule was once a joke felt like, all right, I don't know what to add to this. I don't know how to make it better. If it bombs 3 times in a row, I scrap it. Mm-hmm. But usually the way it would work is I text the joke to myself, and I never physically wrote jokes down, but I'd write the joke in my head throughout the day. And I'd kind of just work it out in my head, try it out at a mic. If it went well, punch it up, try it at another mic. But in terms of how long it takes, it's weird because there have been, maybe you can attest to this too, there are times where you write a joke and for whatever reason, it's just ready. Just the first time you do it, it kills and it's done. And then there are other jokes where I look back and I'm like, it probably took 6 months to make that funny. You know what I mean? Like really rough ideas. And I'm like, I'll try this again another time. So yeah, sometimes it's right away and sometimes it takes forever. It's all very inconsistent.
That's interesting. Yeah, I interested to hear on your like texting it to yourself. I think at least the way I've done it as well, and I think a lot of people do with like short phrases, short keywords.
Yeah, exactly.
And then I do kind of the same thing where I'll develop it more in my head than ever. Like I think the like Seinfeld style or whatever, if you want to pick a name, is like very exact in terms of writing it all out. It's interesting to hear there are 2 sides of that issue. Another question in the chat, Candace, what other mediums besides stand-up do you incorporate jokes into, and is it as gratifying as stand-up comedy?
That's an interesting question. I'll obviously writing satire, but I think, to be completely honest, and I love writing scripts. I wrote a pilot to have in my back pocket, screenplays, stuff like that. But to be honest, stand-up to me is the most gratifying. So everything is kind of secondary to that, and that I love writing articles, but I wouldn't say it's as gratifying as being in front of an actual crowd and you hear them laugh or hear them laugh.
It's a high. That's the...
Yeah, exactly. And there's just nothing quite is as good as that.
Yeah, I think I would agree. I think a lot of people, especially the kind of people who are drawn to stand-up comedy as a career, would probably agree with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's but yeah, I mean, writing satire can also be just as fun, but there's something less gratifying about the 100 people read this. It's like, what does that mean to me?
Yeah, exactly.
Did they like it? Did they just click on it and click off? Yeah, I totally.
That's the other thing, because you can write something. For example, I'll write a joke and I'll be like, this is either really funny or it's just funny to me. Because I've written jokes that I realize, I think this is funny. No one else does. This is just for me. Sure. But if you do that in stand-up, you find out immediately. It bombs. You're like, okay, no one thinks that's funny. But with an article, you could think an article is hilarious and people will like it to be nice. But at the end of the day, I'm like, I have no idea if people really think this is funny.
Yeah.
You can't kill or bomb with an article.
And there's also somewhat of a high even to bombing where you're like, you know, if my joke fucking sucks, at least I then have to work my way out of that. Like, that's fun too.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So
yeah. And hopefully we can do that on real stages with real crowds at some point in the future.
Man, eventually. Eventually. It's not permanent.
Yeah, nothing is. Keep it open. Anyone else? Questions? We got a real life star here with us.
Hey, repping from Baltimore. Hey, Drew. I've had a pleasure of seeing you live a few times.
Oh, really?
Yeah, very hilarious.
Thanks.
So how do you, you want to write original jokes, right? But then you also want to see stand-up performers, right? To get the whole inspiration of like how stand-up actually exists. But you don't want to end up like writing the kind of same jokes as they do. So how do you draw the line between being original and finding inspiration by watching other comedians, if that makes sense?
Yeah, in my opinion, when you first start, it's easy to accidentally copy your favorite comedians. Where you rewatch a video, you're like, oh, I'm talking just like Mitch Hedberg or whatever. And then I think when you find your own voice, it's almost like trying on different outfits. Like, does this style work for me? Does that style work for me? But once you find your style, it becomes easier to not accidentally lift someone else's style. So once you feel like you've kind of found your voice, it's easy to find inspiration without stealing. There have been times, and I think every comic has had this, where you write a joke and then let's say you watch a Netflix special and you're like, oh, this comic has this same premise. I can't do this anymore. Like, not even exactly the same joke, but like the same premise, similar enough where I'm like, oh, if I do this, it's going to sound like I'm stealing. So that's the big part, is just like making sure you're not doing someone else's bit if it's too similar.
Yeah, I'll dig in a little bit on I'm interviewing, very serious. With finding your voice, what would you say your like style or voice? I mean, that might be a tough question or weird question. Like, how would you describe yourself? And what was, like, if anything, you can speak to the process of finding that, developing that, trying different stuff out. I'd be interested to hear.
Yeah. Well, I do know, because I started young, I started as a teenager and I loved comedy. That's why I did it. But for a long time, I did not have my own voice. Like, I'd go on stage and I was just talking exactly like Sam Kinison, exactly like Mitch Hedberg, exactly like Dice Clay, like Chris Rock, like whoever. And I don't think you find your voice by just doing it. But when you think too hard about it, I think you don't find your voice because you're thinking about it too much. I think you stumble into what your voice is. I don't know how to describe my style. I guess very energetic and very silly. But I don't know. I feel like whenever a comic describes their own style, they inevitably come off as pretentious.
It's hard. I definitely gave you a loaded question there. That's that. I mean, that's where the whole going up thing.
Yeah, and obviously, I don't want to make it sound like don't practice. You should go up a lot, like at least 4 times a week, maybe 5. You should go up a lot. I just don't believe in every night or doing a million a night. I think.
And there's also, sorry.
No, I was just gonna say I think it's counterproductive.
Yeah, no, and I think there's also something to be said for going up at 4 different open mics a week, or a show at 4 different places, rather than like
go to the same place a lot.
Yeah, when you're at the fourth wall all night, every night, or whatever, wherever you are,
I'm having
it's just
PTSD
be bad.
flashbacks when the words fourth wall.
Yeah, that's actually where I think we met the first time.
Yeah.
That
I feel like, and I love the fourth wall. I think you'd attest to this. It's like the mecca for like incel comedy.
Oh, totally. It's incels to the max. There's like one woman in every mic
they're always uncomfortable.
Feel horrible for her.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's terrible. It can be fun, but pretty much not unlike the USComedians mic. But that's harsh but fair. All right, anyone else?
I can ask a question.
Yeah, go for it.
So I'm part of Sack of Troy, the comedic newspaper here. I was wondering like what your process is for getting like pitches acquired by like the papers you write for, and like how you do that.
Typically, at least with most of my bosses for the sites I've written for, they'd ask me to pitch a few at a time. So I'd pitch like 3 to 5 at a time. And if I didn't have any ideas, I'd kind of force myself. I'd sit down like, come on, think of something. Think of 5 pitches. You can do it. Sometimes I'd write pitches that I don't even like. Just keep writing until I eventually stumbled onto something I liked. So it's like, even if I can't think of anything good, keep going and something good will happen. So I think I just write a bunch of pitches and choose a handful where I'm like, okay, I think these are pretty good, and then send them to my bosses.
I'd love to hear more about the editorial process because obviously we have our own process for a college newspaper, but what is it like on the professional level?
I will say, so like, for example, with DJ Booth, whenever I had an article idea I loved and they either rejected the pitch or I sent it in and then they're like, we're not going to put it up. I put it on Medium. But in terms of the editorial process, obviously I wasn't one of the editors at the site, so I never necessarily had my hands on what the finished article would look like. Every now and then I'd write an article and then the version they published would be significantly different. Sometimes worse, sometimes better. But yeah, it's about like just sending in what you wrote and hoping that if they like it, they won't change too many things. Or if they do change it, that they make it way better.
Right, of course. And yeah, I mean,
you still get the credit though, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
What about Medium? Like, that's just you self-publishing, right? Or is that
Medium is, it's like the YouTube of writing. Anyone can go on and write stuff. And I always tell aspiring writers to get on Medium because it's a great way to get discovered. And you can get paid on Medium, but it requires you for your page to have a paywall, which I think is stupid, to charge people to read your articles.
Yeah,
I don't get paid with Medium articles. It's just for fun and to try to get stuff out there.
Yeah, and practice. And yeah, I mean, it sounds like you sort of found a path to getting paid through Medium.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is cool. Anyone else?
Yeah, I wanted to bring it back to touring. I was kind of interested when you were talking about your experiences touring and then headlining shows where you were saying you would hit up comedy clubs that you had played as openers and then you would go back and headline. What was your experience like between going there the first time and then opening for a different comic and then coming back and headlining yourself? Did you see a smaller turnout, bigger turnout? Was it about the same? And when you were booking those shows, what was that process like?
Yeah. Well, typically, like the first time I did that was at this little theater in Baltimore called the Avalon Theater. And I was the opener, was that process. And I was lucky in that, for whatever reason, that's one of those venues. It's in Easton, Maryland, where I think it's just a very boring area. So people don't have shit to do. So those shows would always be sold out, even though they don't know who you are. So every now and then you'll get lucky in that it's a venue that just sells tickets no matter what. And it'll be a sold out crowd, even though they haven't heard of you. So I got lucky like that, and that it'll be a big crowd just because of the venue's good at promoting shows.
What would you say for, obviously you run your own shows. I have run my own show in the past, obviously not during COVID, but like, what are your tips for self-production, self-promotion? Where have you found success and failure? Like, just in general, talk about that kind of stuff.
I don't know. Running a show and doing stand-up, as you know, are like two completely different beasts. And I love putting on shows. And I'm not saying this to like be self-deprecating. I'm still not great at it. I
would say, I think I'm terrible at it too. And
because it's annoying in that the most effective way to get people to a show is to annoy the shit out of people. So if I was putting on a show, I'd text everyone like, hey, show tomorrow night, 8:00, and just kind of spam them. And you feel like such a dick and a fraud doing it, just like sending the same pasted text to everyone you've ever met. but it's the most effective way, but it is like, you feel annoying. You're like, here we go.
Yeah, and I think that like you said, they're two different beasts. Like, you know, you can be funny, you can be able to put on a good show, but the production side is obviously more of a organizational side, and you know, sending a lot of emails and texts.
The house show was significantly easier to promote because it's also a mic, and it was essentially also kind of a party. So instead of texting comic friends, hey, come watch my show you're not on, it's, hey, come do a set at this show, do one of the spots. And for my non-comic friends, instead of saying, come watch us do stand-up, it's, hey, come have a drink and hang out.
Right. Yeah, that
house show is a million times easier to promote. But yeah, it's difficult. I don't even have any advice. If you have advice, you tell me.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you're spot on with, you know, spamming people like a dick. I was just thinking when you were saying that, like, maybe hiding behind a official Instagram account helps you feel like less bad about it. I don't know if
I haven't even thought about that, but that's a good idea.
I was just thinking like, oh, I might feel a little I mean, still feel bad, but
at least then it's like not your name. You're like a faceless entity.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I mean, I ran a Clubhouse show at 11 p.m. on a Friday, which is a horrible time slot.
Yeah.
And so like, it's a, you know, week to week struggle of, oh, this week there's 3 people in the audience and they're all on the improv team that's performing or whatever. Yeah, exactly. Like,
I've had plenty of shows where the crowd was just the comics on the show.
Yeah, that's just, you know, part of the game. And then there are times where a bunch of people show up and you're like, was it my Facebook event was really well written? Was it like someone on the lineup is just awesome? Was it just luck or chance? It's crazy. Yeah.
It's like a crap shot. All of shows that there's no one came, all of shows that are packed, and I don't know what I did different. I think it's just luck. I think like more people are in the mood to come. But I don't know. But it's a pain in the ass. It's the one thing about
we can agree on that.
It's right now.
Yeah, it's one thing we don't have to deal with.
I've thought about putting on a Zoom Mom Spaghetti, but I'm like, nah, because then I'd have to go back to text spamming people.
Yeah, no, I did like a Facebook live stream show for my show Cabaret, and I didn't do as much spamming or advertisement. And I mean, it's funny because a crowd full of just comics is demoralizing, but almost more demoralizing is a Facebook event that says like exactly 8 people are watching right now, and like one of them is your dad, you know, like
who doesn't live in LA and he's just being supportive,
right? He's just like but yeah, keep it open, and anyone who has a question,
I wanted to add on to this touring thing really quick. Like, I wanted to ask more about when you were self-producing shows, especially out-of-town shows from when you lived in Baltimore. Did you ever have a team working with you, or was it mostly just you trying out different things and having to deal with that crapshoot of you don't know what works and what doesn't?
Oh, yeah, it was always just me. And, but that kind of makes it more fun because when you do something by yourself, when things go well, you get to take all the credit and you're like, wow, I did this by myself. And when it goes bad, you have no one else to blame, so you have to figure it out. But yeah, I didn't really have a team with any of that.
Cool.
Lo, go ahead. You had a question? Go for it.
Yeah, Drew, what is one thing that you would have changed differently based off of your past career that you think would have helped you out in the future or help out future comedians?
That's a really good question. Honestly, the main thing that comes to mind are just dumb jokes where I'm like, why did I do that joke? Or, you know what it is? Putting up, right when I was starting, you know, when you first start, an okay set feels like an amazing set because you're not that good yet. And putting up YouTube videos and realizing years later that you were bombing in the video, but you're so new. You're like 2 people left with that one joke. Oh my God. Looks like a Netflix special. So I'd say putting up videos too soon and just jokes where I look back and I'm like, why did I think that was funny? Or just jokes where I'd look back and I'd be like, that was hacky. Like, why did I participate in like that hacky type of joke that everyone does?
I guess.
But it's all a learning experience, though.
Exactly.
I mean, you can't regret it too much.
Yeah, and I feel like everyone kind of, anyone that goes to a lot of comedy shows or is a comic, like John, you can attest to this, there's certain types of like overdone joke structures, and I don't know.
I'm on the dating apps.
Exactly, like, so you guys on these dating apps, or one of them was like, I know what you're thinking, I look like a mixture of this celebrity had a baby with this celebrity. Like,
Charles Manson.
Exactly. I look like a completely different person from the flyer, but I had the long hair and the beard. And my opening joke was always like, people tell me I look like Charles Manson. And it wasn't a bad joke, but I just realized that fucking everyone has a joke about I look like XYZ. So I'd look back and I'd like be embarrassed about that. Like, oh, I did that easy route of like, I look like this. So things like that, where I'm like, I told an easy joke. I feel like I cheated, you know what I mean?
It's all learning as long as it's not immortalized on video.
Exactly.
Then you don't have to be embarrassed.
Videos.
Yeah. That's why if you scroll down in Drew's Twitter, it's just like, I guess it started in 2018. And
everything before 2018 will get me canceled. A lot of deleting.
Yeah, well, you gotta cull the herd sometimes. It's comedy is a numbers game.
Exactly, yeah.
Any more questions? Anyone else? Oh, there's a good one. What is your favorite joke you've written and why? That's a fun one.
Oh, that's a really good question. I need to think about that for a second. Well, I don't know if I have an answer for this, because John, tell me if you feel like this, where, during times, not COVID, where you're doing stand-up a lot, I feel like I constantly have a new favorite joke. Whenever I have a new joke and it's finished and it's doing well, that's now my favorite joke until the next one.
Right. Yeah.
I'm not sick of doing it yet. You're still excited to tell it. It's
the new joke. Yeah, exactly.
It's still a recent story or observation. So yeah, it would change constantly. It would always just be my latest joke that does well.
That's a nice cop out there, Drew. You really dodged the question. No, but there's something to that. Like I was saying, like I have this, I guess this is true for all comedians, but I have this thing where I hate doing the same material again for the same people. Like I would, because Fourth Wall was what was closest to my house. And so I would go there 2-3 times a week. And I'd feel like, the same guys are going to be there. I don't want to do even though this is my good joke, I don't really want to do it. And then you end up, which is good because you end up testing stuff that sucks, but then you also end up finding stuff that...
The other thing I've noticed is when you're sick of a joke, it isn't doing as well anymore because your heart's not in it and you're not phoning it in. So there have been many a times where I just got sick of a joke. But the problem is I will say there are a lot of comedians that just are always doing the same jokes in front of the same crowd. And even if they're pretty good jokes and they're like, why didn't it do well? It's because the whole crowd is your friends and they've all heard that joke 100 times now.
Right. Yeah, no, that can happen, especially when you're going to the same mic.
Exactly.
Or you only go to 1 or 2 different mics,
And I think everyone kind of has a home mic, like their favorite mic, which is fine. And I say go to those mics as much as you can. But yeah, it's easy to get trapped in this echo chamber where you're doing the same exact set for the same exact people. And you're just wasting my time.
Yeah, that's why I think, not that this is necessarily applicable to COVID, but like I said, the Fourth Wall was like my home mic, where if I signed up for the Fourth Wall, I had, a page of stuff I just wrote that day or the day before. And then if I I'm out at Bert's or I'm out at Lyric or wherever I am, that's not, that I don't know the people, that's where I'll go back to my, quote unquote tight 5 or whatever.
Exactly. With crowds you're most comfortable with, that's where you try out stuff for the first time. That's how I am with Fourth Wall too. I think because it's so low stakes, because I know I'll probably bomb anyway.
Right.
I'm I may as well do brand new stuff.
Right. And that's true. That's what mics are for. And that's what I was saying. I think there's also like a big distinction between getting up every night at a mic that you've been to 3 times that week already, or getting up every night and it's a new crowd.
Because
Yeah,
I
go
will
ahead.
say, and I'm sure you'll agree with this, mics are for bombing.
Exactly. And that you're just supposed to bomb 100 times so that you can live in that feeling. And they're also for, in general, like other comics. Like the best part of a mic is when I do a bit and I'm sitting afterwards and another comic's like, hey, you should try this tag, or you should switch these 2 words, and then I'll do the same for some. But like I really do see, like, not so much the like writing on stage fantasy that maybe up and coming comics have, like I'm just gonna improvise and spin pure gold, but like the like I do something and then we're sitting, we're outside after the mic and Drew's like, hey, this sucked, but here's the here's a tag or whatever.
Or just
like
imagine walking up to you after a mic, okay, John, this sucks.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. We just cut straight to the point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh God, this makes me both miss and not miss open mics and the fourth wall.
Absolutely. It's a mix. The one good thing about not being able to do stand-up is it's made me miss open mics. And anyone that's done open mics, that's weird. Because open mics are hell.
They're chores.
Yeah, they're not fun.
Yeah. All right. Anyone else have questions, please?
I kind of like waiting 3 hours to get my name called and then getting 2 minutes, maybe. Interesting place to be in your life.
Yeah.
Daniel! I'm sorry, wait, I don't know if that was private or not. No, that was to everyone.
Yikes. Daniel.
God.
Anyone questions? I think we've pretty much learned everything there is to know about comedy.
Everything.
I got a question.
Yeah, go for it.
Did you have like a perception of how your comedic identity was going to be this year, and then was it changed by not being able to practice that during open mics because of quarantine?
Not necessarily, because I felt like I knew the type of stand-up I wanted to do, but obviously I didn't anticipate that there'd be damn near no stand-up. So I couldn't tell if my computer messed up or not. But yeah, I don't know if I necessarily had a specific perception about what I'd do in terms of my comedy style this year, but I didn't know I'd do nothing with it.
How often do you change personas, if you change personas at all?
Once you find your persona, you don't change it. It's like finding what works and sticking with it. So I'd say when I first started, I changed my persona 1,000 fucking times. But now that I feel like, knock on wood, I kind of have my style and my persona, I try not to mess with it. I'm like, okay, I found it. I'm going to stick with this.
This might be getting too deep into that big murky COVID cloud we were talking about earlier, but what do you see as the, if it's not Zoom shows, the future of your shows you're producing, your shows you're going to be on? Like I don't know, just what do you think? What do we have to look forward to?
Well, I think once eventually, we don't know when, but eventually when things go back to normal, in terms of Mom Spaghetti, I don't know the venue, LA Connection Comedy Theater. I have no idea if it'll still be open, but I want to keep doing it. So if that's closed, maybe find another venue. The house show me and my roommate put on, that's what I'm looking forward to the most. I think because I miss comedy and I miss parties, and that's a mixture of the two.
Exactly.
I do think, tell me if you agree with this. My theory is once things return to normal, I do think outdoor shows are going to be the norm for a while.
I was just about to say, yeah, I think, and they already are right now. I'm seeing, like, I saw photos from a mic on the beach today, which sounds pretty cool, like, and mostly outdoor stuff, which, I mean, that's a good balance for both safety and just, it's cool. I mean, it's nice to do a show outdoors. It's fun.
LA, but I do feel like even once, because things won't become normal again until there's a vaccine. But I feel like once there's a vaccine and things are finally returning to normal, I still think there's going to be a lot of outdoor shows because we've realized how nice it can be and because everyone's still kind of nervous.
Yeah, I do feel like
no idea. That's something I was thinking about today.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's going to be some of those longer lasting, just it's never going to feel the same to like pack into seats right next to another person.
Yeah, at least not for a while.
For a while. So yeah. No, and I think that's a good thing. Like you said, good weather and it can be a nice vibe. And I mean, like a mic on the beach sounds like a great idea. We should have been doing that before, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, that's nicer than like a shitty little room.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Unless there's anyone has any final questions, I'll going once, going twice.
How's your day been?
That's a good one.
It's been fine. It's been a really especially crazy day. I know with COVID, every day is a crazy day, but it's been a very crazy day in my house for reasons I probably can't get into, but it's been an okay day. Cool. How's your day been?
I mean, it's been all right. I had a little up and down with a job that I was gonna take and then couldn't take right away, but
yeah, that's frustrating.
It'll come back.
Yeah.
All right, now everyone else asked Drew how his day. Everyone else, one by one, we're gonna ask you how we're gonna just talk about our days.
This is gonna become group therapy now.
Yeah, we're gonna go deep. Yeah, I mean, all right. If no one asks a question while I do this brief wrap up, then we're wrapping up. So just think of it now. I'm stalling. We're here. Drew Landry. Well, thank you, Drew. It was great talking to you, man. And we'll hopefully be telling jokes.
Hopefully soon enough.
At some point in the future. So.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, man. Have a good night.
Go ahead and end the meeting. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, guys.